If I could introduce myself to you, my name is Ewan Ingleby, and I'm the school's postgraduate tutor, and I've got the great honour of introducing the conference and welcoming you to Teesside. That's the most important role that I have. What I would like to do is also introduce some interesting themes that I think relate to precarity. When I heard that my role was to welcome you to the conference, I thought, well, I wonder if I just have to explain where the toilets are and what happens if the fire alarm goes off. But I've got some more interesting things that I want to build into this welcome. I'm so excited about the topic, and as I say, it's a real honour for me to speak in front of you this morning about precarity. I come from an education background, and you'll perhaps realise this when you see that I've actually got two objectives to this welcome, and I've listed them there, almost Ofsted-like. And on my slides, I've got some pictures of teachers, and none of them look very happy. And that's perhaps a sign of some of the things that are going on in education in England. So my two objectives in this short welcome are, first of all, I want to try and develop some of the themes in my own Precarity Teas blog. I've been involved with the conference arrangements, and the conference team wanted to produce some blogs about precarity that linked to our subject areas. And I produced one, and it's a great honour for me just to embellish some of those themes that I introduced in the blog. And then the second main theme of my welcome is I want to just focus on what I would argue is the link between economic strictures and educational precarity. And really, I'm a warm-up act. I don't want to steal anyone's thunder. The movers, the shakers, the important people are here. But what I wanted to do is just, if you like, set the ball rolling. I'm a warm-up act. And I wanted to think of some themes that perhaps wouldn't be focused upon in the other presentations. In my blog that I did ahead of the conference, I selected a piece of writing by the great English poet Philip Larkin. And when you hear the name Philip Larkin and you hear about his poetry, I think you often think of the famous or infamous poem about mum and dad and what they did to us. But this is a very clever piece of writing, and I think it's a piece of writing that very much links to the theme of precarity. It's a clever piece of writing. We don't need to think about grammar. We don't need to think about subjunctive verbs or anything like that. We just need to read the words in this clever piece of writing. And I think it's a clever piece of writing because it's a very clever metaphor for our lives as human beings. What Larkin's doing in this poem is he's saying that so many of our experiences as human beings in the world today are a bit like what that field of cattle are experiencing. It's a metaphor for human life. There are the herd of cattle, and they're having a wonderful time. They're happy as cows can be. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful spring day. They're in this field eating their lush grass, and all is well in their world. But what they want to do is they want to explore their world. They want to go beyond the field that they're in. And eventually they decide to do that. But unfortunately, when they try to get into this field up the hill, they blunder into the electric fence that the farmer has placed around their field. And Larkin writes that the muscle-shredding violence gives no quarter. And what this beautiful piece of writing is about is it's about the loss of hope. It's about the shattering of dreams. The cattle realize that the human world is actually quite a scary place. They lose their sense of hope and optimism. And I think that is a metaphor for a theme that we're focusing on today. Precarity is all about that. It was interesting last night in the pub when I was speaking with a couple of the conference delegates, and I was chatting away to Alan and Colin and Luke, and we were saying that so many young people lose their sense of optimism, a little bit like this field of cattle. They blunder up against the wires and their state becomes precarious. The reason why I like the writing is that I think it's clever writing, far more clever than anything I could do. And what Larkin does is he emphasizes the wires through the rhyming words in the poem. So the last word in the first sentence rhymes with the last word in the last sentence. And he does it deliberately to emphasize the wires that are present within our lives, the barriers that are there. And I suppose he's emphasizing that sense of precarity. So that's a first theme that I want to introduce. I won't take up much more time. But the next theme that I just wanted to explore a little bit is to think about this theme with regards to education in England at present. And I've got another visual image. My visual image for what's going on in education in England is the Yellow Brick Road. And I think we've got to say goodbye to the Yellow Brick Road. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing the song. If I broke out into song, you'd all leave the room. But it's an interesting image. It's not my image. It comes from Matthias Urban. And what Urban says is that our educators are so obsessed with reaching the final destination. It's as if we've become somehow obsessed with end destinations. And you can see that with what's going on in our schools. And I would argue that this is the reason why we have precarity in education in England. The little children get into primary school and everybody talks about the SAT scores that they'll get at the end of their primary education experience. They get into secondary school and everyone talks about their GCSE results and their A-level results. There's this focus on the end destination. They get to university and everybody talks about the degree classification that they're going to get. There's an obsession with reaching the end destination. And I would argue that we need to rethink this because this is contributing to precarity in education. We don't need to focus on the end destination. We need to think about the steps along the way. It's the steps along the way, the process, that we need to draw attention to. And yet so many of our policymakers are focusing on that end destination. You can see it with government documents like DFES 2008 and BIS 2009 that have essentially shaped the higher education culture in England that we're operating in. And what they value is the end product, not the processes. And this is what I would argue is at the heart of our uncertainty in education. Again, you can see it with this statement from the current Secretary of State for Education, Nicky Morgan, where what she's emphasising is the importance of good skills. But she's saying nothing about the steps along the road that will generate those fine skills. Now, my argument is this is why we have a sense of precarity in education. There are consequences for us as educationalists. I would push the argument further and I would say that there's not a sound philosophy of education in England. We don't have a Rudolf Steiner. We don't have a Maria Montessori. There's an absence of philosophy. And this is why we get this sense of precarity. I have another image for what's going on, and that image is of the famous cartoon Toy Story character Buzz Lightyear. And Buzz Lightyear's key phrase was that we should go to infinity and beyond. And that is the message that we get from the policymakers. Reach the end destination. But there's nothing said about the steps along the way. And as I say, I think there are consequences because of that. The reality, and I was talking with Alan from Edinburgh about this, the reality of working with children and families is it's more about the messiness of human life, the processes, and yet we have a government that focuses on the end product. I don't want to just leave with this slide because this is a bit too much like the American dream, and there's obviously flaws with that philosophy. The message from Toy Story is that you need to find yourself by looking at yourself as an individual and not looking at the end destination. But in England, there are challenges to that. There are economic realities. This is the slide that I want to end with. And what's interesting is that I think our precarious English education comes from the economic structures that we have in this country. I can't just say that. I need to back that up with research evidence. And this is the evidence that came from a conference in Bremen in September that I attended. And the key argument that was presented by the researchers there is that our standards of education are critically shaped by economic structures. And if we are living within what is referred to as neoliberal economies, there are lower rates of literacy than in coordinated economies. There is an economic reality to educational precarity. And if you believe these researchers, and I believe them, then the critical ingredient is the nature of economy. Change the nature of the economy, and we will change educational precarity. So there are just a few thoughts that I wanted to introduce to you. I don't want to spend any more time here because there are, as I say, movers and shakers in front of you. I've got some references there which, again, I hope you might find interesting and useful. But as I say, it's a great honour for me to introduce the conference, and I'm sure you will enjoy it as much as I will today.